From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The use of prostitutes in conditions of poverty and helplessness and conflict is exploitation. It is abuse, and it's intolerable in our organization. What happened to let the country director go away with some dignity was wrong. This is something that wouldn't happen today in Oxfam.
Oxfam is facing a growing crisis for covering up sex crimes by its aid workers in Haiti after the devastating 2010 earthquake. We'll speak to the reporter at the Times of London who exposed the scandal, plus the head of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, and the Haitian writer Edwidge Dantica in Miami. Then we look at the role of Army Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps programs after Nicholas Cruz, a former JROTC cadet, carried out one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history. Cruz was on the school's JROTC rifle team when it received a $10,000 grant from the NRA. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Syrian government's continuing its deadly barrage of airstrikes and artillery fire against the rebel-held enclave of eastern Ghouta outside capital Damascus. Aid workers report at least 200 people have been killed over the last 48 hours. Many of the victims are women and children. On Tuesday, the charity UNICEF released a nearly blank statement on the killings, writing, "No words will do justice to the children killed, their mothers, their fathers, and their loved ones," followed by quote marks and 10 blank lines. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert called Tuesday for an immediate ceasefire.
We call on all parties to commit to the unconditional de-escalation of violence. Russia must end its support of the Assad regime and its allies. They're responsible for the attacks, for the dire humanitarian situation in East Ghouta, and for the horrendous civilian death toll. The United States supports the United Nations' demand for a month-long cessation of violence to allow for the unfettered delivery of humanitarian supplies and the urgent medical evacuation of civilians in East Ghouta. The cessation of violence must begin now, and those needing emergency assistance should be allowed to evacuate immediately.
In Florida, 100 students who survived the deadly shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School have arrived at the Florida capital, Tallahassee, to demand action from lawmakers on gun control. This is Alfonso Calderon, one of the students.
My friends and the families that are never going to have their kids come back to them again. That motivates me every single day, and it will never be a deterrent for any reason. Nothing could bring me down, being reminded every single day of the horrific things I saw, and hopefully no one ever has to see ever again.
Their arrival came as the Florida legislature voted down a measure to open debate on banning large-capacity magazines and semi-automatic rifles, such as the AR-15 that was used by the shooter, a white former student named Nicholas Cruz. The student activists are planning to march to the Florida legislature this morning. Meanwhile, President Trump is calling for a ban on so-called bump stocks, which allow semi-automatic rifles to act like machine guns capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute.
Just a few moments ago, I signed a memorandum directing the Attorney General to propose regulations to ban all devices that turn legal weapons into machine guns. I expect that these critical regulations will be finalized, Jeff, very soon. The key in all of these efforts, as I said in my remarks the day after the shooting, is that we cannot merely take actions that make us feel like we are making a difference. We must actually make a difference.
The National Rifle Association heavily lobbied for a rule change on the sale of bump stocks rather than a congressional ban following the Las Vegas massacre. Rule changes can be easily reversed and avoid Congress taking up regulations on the sale of bump stocks and other gun control measures. President Trump is also hosting a listening session at the White House today with high school students and teachers who've survived mass shootings around the country. Meanwhile, in Florida, while the legislature voted down debate on gun control, it did approve a resolution declaring pornography a health risk, particularly for teenagers. President Trump has again attacked one of the 19 women who've accused him of sexual harassment and assault after her story was published in a front-page Washington Post article headlined, "Is Anyone Listening?" Rachel Crooks accuses Trump of forcibly kissing her without her consent on the lips while she worked as a receptionist in Trump Tower in 2005. On Tuesday, President Trump called her a liar, tweeting, quote, "A woman I don't know and to the best of my knowledge never met is on the front page of the fake news Washington Post saying I kissed her for 2 minutes yet in the lobby of Trump Tower 12 years ago. Never happened. Who would do this in a public space with live security?" Unquote. In response, Rachel Crooks called on Trump to release the security camera footage. This is Rachel Crooks recounting the incident at a news conference here in New York in December.
About 12 years ago, as a young receptionist in Trump Tower, I was forcibly kissed by Mr. Trump during our first introduction. Mr. Trump repeatedly kissed my cheeks and ultimately my lips in an encounter that has since impacted my life well beyond the initial occurrence and feelings of self-doubt and insignificance I had. That some men think they can use their power, position, or notoriety to demean and attack women speaks to their character, not ours, which, believe me, is a tough lesson learned.
Rachel Crooks is now running for a seat in the Ohio State Legislature. To hear our discussion with more of the women who've accused President Trump of sexual harassment, assault, or misconduct, go to DemocracyNow.org. In more news on sexual harassment and assault, a woman who's accused Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas of sexual harassment is calling for his impeachment from the bench. Journalist Angela Wright Shannon says Thomas repeatedly pressured her to date him and made comments about her breasts when they worked together at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in the mid-'80s. She's one of multiple women who've accused Thomas of sexual harassment, including renowned law professor Anita Hill. The co-founder of the fashion brand Guess, Paul Marciano, has stepped down after supermodel Kate Upton accused him of forcibly groping her breasts after a photo shoot in 2010. Guess's stocks have dropped more than 20% since Upton publicly accused Marciano a few weeks ago. President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, is reportedly facing off against White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly over Kushner's limited interim security clearances. Kushner has been tasked with overseeing the Middle East peace process, in addition to an array of other high-profile responsibilities like the U.S. relationship with China. Yet he is one of dozens of White House officials who've been accessing classified information using limited interim security clearances, as the FBI has refused to grant them full security clearances due to issues in their background checks. Among others denied full security clearance was former Staff Secretary Rob Porter, whose clearances were held up because of serious accusations of domestic abuse against both of his ex-wives. Chief of Staff John Kelly came under massive fire after it was revealed the White House knew for months that domestic violence accusations were holding up Porter's security clearance. It just came out when a photo of one of Porter's wives with a black eye was released. Now Kelly is issuing new guidelines that include revoking top clearances for all officials, including Kushner, whose background checks are still pending. At the United Nations, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has called for an international conference to restart the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. In his speech, Abbas said the United States could no longer preside over the peace process because it had, quote, contradicted itself and its own commitments and has violated international law, unquote. Last year, President Trump sparked widespread international outrage after he announced the United States is recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moving the U.S. embassy there. The Israeli government has begun indefinitely jailing African asylum seekers who refuse to leave Israel amidst Israel's threat to jail or expel up to 40,000 Africans fleeing war and persecution in Eritrea and Sudan. On Tuesday, the Israeli government indefinitely imprisoned 7 Eritreans after they refused to be deported to Rwanda or Eritrea. The move sparked protests, including at the Ben Gurion airport, where 5 people were arrested and an Israeli detention center put into it, where hundreds of asylum seekers launched a hunger strike. In Bahrain, human rights activist Nabil Rajab has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for tweeting about the U.S.-backed Saudi-led bombing campaign's killing of civilians in Yemen and alleged torture in Bahrain's notorious Jaw prison. Amnesty International said, quote, "This sentence demonstrates the authorities' ruthless determination to crush all forms of dissent and leaves no room for doubt about the extreme lengths to which they are willing to go in order to silence peaceful critics." Unquote. Rajab has been imprisoned multiple times in recent years for participating in pro-democracy protests and for criticizing the Bahraini government. The United Nations Refugee Agency is warning hundreds of thousands of people have been forced from their homes in the Democratic Republic of Congo amidst an escalation in violence in the DRC's southeast region in recent months. Survivors report killings and rape by armed militias. This is Congolese human rights activist Christine Schuler-Descriver.
It's an economic war. You know, for coltan, that's something we have in our cell phones and in our computer. And I think, like all the countries, you know, like in all the Western countries, they don't want this war to end because they want a mess so they can continue to plunder Congo. And rape was and is still using as terror. If you look at a map and you see where rape are committed, it's all around mines.
Back in the United States, the state of Minnesota has reached an $850 million settlement with the company 3M over allegations the company contaminated drinking water by dumping toxic chemicals called PFCs in landfills for decades since the 1950s. The high-profile case was expected to go to trial today. The Minnesota State Attorney General says the PFCs caused higher rates of cancer and premature births after it contaminated the drinking water. And journalism's prestigious George Polk Awards have been announced. Among the winners, Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey of The New York Times and Ronan Farrow of The New Yorker, who won for exposing Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein's decades of rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment. Another winner was The Intercept's Iona Craig, who won for her expose of a deadly Navy SEAL raid on a village in Yemen. This is Iona Craig talking about the raid on Democracy Now!
There were 26 people in that village who were killed. As you've already mentioned, many of those were women and children. That village has essentially been abandoned now because not only after that raid happened, not only was the entire village strafed and more than 120 livestock were killed, but the US went back a month later at the beginning of March and bombed it for 4 consecutive nights, both with drone strikes and helicopter gunfire, and killed 2 more children and several more adults. So the last person that I spoke to who was living there, Sheikh Aziz Al-Amri, he then left the village and is now living under trees several miles away.
Iona Craig's full interview you can watch at democracynow.org. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We begin today's show with the sexual abuse scandal engulfing the British charity Oxfam. Oxfam has been hit with dozens more misconduct allegations involving a slew of countries in the days since the Times of London revealed Oxfam tried to cover up sex crimes by senior aid workers in Haiti after the devastating 2010 earthquake. On Tuesday, Oxfam's leadership was questioned by British lawmakers in the Parliament, and Oxfam apologized for its failure to report sexual misconduct to Haitian authorities. Prostitution is illegal in Haiti, but Oxfam refused to report the activity of its aid workers to Haitian police. This is the British Parliament's International Development Committee questioning Oxfam's chief executive, Mark Goldring.
Prostitution is illegal in Haiti. Shouldn't Oxfam have reported the matter anyway?
Oxfam should have reported the matter to the Haitian authorities. It wasn't for Oxfam to decide whether a crime had been committed or not, but something that was serious and undermined the rule of law and public confidence in Haiti should have been reported to the relevant Haitian authorities. I can only apologise that Oxfam did not do that.
On Monday, Oxfam released its own internal report into the sex scandal. It concluded senior aid workers at Oxfam, including the country director in Haiti, hired prostitutes at Oxfam properties in Haiti and then tried to cover it up. Oxfam's internal report includes claims 3 Oxfam staff members physically threatened a witness during the charity's internal investigation. Haiti's threatened to expel Oxfam from the country. This is Haiti's External Cooperation Minister, Aviol Florent.
They admitted that there is evidence that Oxfam UK was informed that these crimes occurred. What hurt me is that they admitted that Haitian authorities had at no time been informed by Oxfam Haiti.
Roughly 7,000 people have canceled their donations to Oxfam since the scandal broke. This comes as another well-known charity, Save the Children, is also facing a growing scandal. The charity has told British authorities it has fired 30 employees after 120 misconduct complaints. Save the Children has also apologized to female employees who complained about the former head of the organization, Justin Forsyth. Well, for more, we're joined now by 3 guests. From London, via Democracy Now! Video stream, Sean O'Neill is with us, the chief reporter at the Times newspaper in London, which broke the story of the Oxfam and Save the Children scandals. In Miami, Florida, we're joined by the great Haitian-American novelist, Edwidge Danticat, author of a number of books, including The Farming of Bones, which won an American Book Award. Danticat's new book is The Art of Death, writing the final story. She's just returned from Haiti. And here in New York, Taina Bien-Aimé is with us, Executive Director of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. We welcome you all to Democracy Now! Let's go to London, where this story was exposed by Sean O'Neill and the team at the Times of London. Can you talk about the chronology of what you found out and when you found it out?
This story took quite a long time to piece together. I'd been working on it for approximately 10 months, starting with a very nervous contact approaching me, telling me that all was not right with Oxfam and its behaviour around the world. Took quite a long time to persuade that person to give me more detail. And in October last year, we ran a story about the treatment of Oxfam's country director in Nigeria, a woman called Leslie Agams, who was sexually assaulted while attending a conference in Oxford in 2010. It's her first time in Britain. She reported the sexual assault to her managers at Oxfam. The assault was allegedly carried out by one of her senior managers. She was not told to go to the police. She was not told to make a formal complaint. She was asked or advised to try and settle that informally. 3 months later, she was sacked by the man she alleges had sexually assaulted her. When we ran that story and Oxfam admitted they'd got things wrong, that kind of opened the door to other people to come forward to us with more information. And one of the first things that came out was quite a lot of concern about what happened in Haiti in 2011, when at the time Oxfam had put out a statement saying that 7 men had been either dismissed or allowed to resign for gross misconduct and bringing Oxfam into disrepute. But they did not go into the detail of what happened. And we managed to track down several people who knew exactly what had happened, had blown the whistle at the time, and were still extremely angry about the way Oxfam had handled that, but also extremely angry extremely nervous, about speaking. So it took a long time again to persuade them to speak even off the record to us. but their accounts were bolstered. They verified each other, even though these people were not in touch with one another. Some of them were able to supply documents, including the investigation report. And by the end of January, we were fairly confident we had the story in place. But then we had a long period of to and fro with Oxfam about what they wanted to say, how they wanted to respond to it. We gave them a long time to respond. And really, for the first, for the first week, but for the week before the story and the 3 or 4 days after the story, they were still in denial. They were saying we didn't hide anything. We had been totally transparent back in 2011, and really the unraveling of this over the past week and the unraveling of their reputation, their global reputation, I think has been quite shocking. And I think that's why it's still having ramifications today, almost a fortnight after we broke the story.
Well, let me go to Oxfam International Executive Director Winnie Byanyima, who said, quote, hideous men had abused the trust of the public and were not representative of Oxfam's principles.
Please allow me to begin by saying how sorry I am about what has happened. I'm ashamed. I've spent my life trying to stand up for women's rights and to fight for people living in poverty. So this is painful for me. So this is about aligning our people with the values of Oxfam. Some hideous men came into our organization and abused the trust of the British people, the supporters, but they were able to get away, to get a recommendation to leave. This was wrong.
Thank you.
But so we're going to change the culture, and working on the culture costs money, and we're going to put money on this. The use of prostitutes in conditions of poverty and helplessness and conflict is exploitation. It is abuse, and it's intolerable in our organization. What happened to let the country director go away with some dignity was wrong. This is something that wouldn't happen today in Oxfam.
So that is Oxfam International Executive Director Winnie Byanyima testifying before the British Parliament, somewhat undercut by Oxfam's chief executive, Mark Goldring, who apologized for implying international outrage of Oxfam's sex abuse scandal was overblown, saying it was not as if Oxfam, quote, murdered babies in their cots. He said this in an interview with The Guardian. This is Stephen Twigg, chair of the International Development Committee, questioning Goldring.
In your interview with The Guardian published on Saturday, you appeared to be downplaying this scandal, using the parallel with the murder of babies in their cots, which many people regarded as grossly inappropriate. Can I give you the opportunity to apologise?
Certainly, Chairman. I do apologise. I was thinking under stress. I'd given many interviews, I'd made many decisions to try and lead Oxfam's response to this. I was thinking about amazing work I'd seen Oxfam do across the world, most recently for refugees coming from Myanmar. I should not have said those things. It is not for Oxfam to judge issues of proportionality or motivation. I repeat Oxfam's broader apology and my personal apology. I am sorry, we are sorry for the damage that Oxfam has done, both to the people of Haiti, but also to wider efforts for aid and development by possibly undermining public support. So I wholeheartedly apologise for those comments and commit to work in that greater public interest so that Oxfam can make a powerful role in the work that we all believe in.
That's Oxfam's chief executive, Mark Goldring, apologizing for his comments that it's not as if we were murdering babies in their cots. So, Sean O'Neill, if you can talk specifically about Haiti and the Haitian and the director of Oxfam in Haiti, Roland Van Houwer-Myren, and what exactly he is accused of doing, what you wrote about in the Times of London.
Van Houwer-Myren was the country director appointed shortly after the earthquake in 2010, he had a history of suspected misconduct. He was allowed to resign from a charity called Merlin, which is now part of Save the Children in Liberia, in 2004. He joined Oxfam in 2006 in Chad. Again, there were concerns about what Oxfam calls in its report gender issues, which is kind of management speak for, I guess, misconduct towards women, either beneficiaries or staff. Despite those issues, he was allowed to move on to the Congo and then eventually to Haiti, where the allegations against him and the allegations that were investigated and that he admitted to were that he was having sex with native women, paying them for sex. And I've seen the transcript of his interview with the Oxfam investigation, and he admits in there that he had what he calls prostitutes visit him on 2 or 3 occasions at his home, which was, I believe, quite a luxurious villa known as the Eagle's Nest, where he lived alone, surrounded by security guards. He could live a very private and secluded life there. But he also talks in that interview with the investigators about young mothers coming to him and visiting him, and he's giving them baby milk, diapers, goods, basically essentials that they are living on, and implies that he's doing that in return for sexual favors. And one of my colleagues is in Haiti at the moment, has been reporting from Haiti, and has tracked down and interviewed one of the young women who slept with Van Houwermeiren, who said, yes, he did trade aid for sex with her, and that she was very young at the time, 16, 17, and that although she now looks back on it, with some distaste, she felt at the time it was saving her life and saving her baby's life. So hugely exploitative conduct on his part. But quite separate from that, there was a group of aid workers who were staying in an apartment block, who just a group of men, an all-male apartment block. And the allegations against them that they were bringing in prostitutes, or their Haitian drivers were being sent out at night to bring in prostitutes supplied by a local pimp, and that those women were being subjected to some pretty degrading treatment. A number of those men, I believe, were found guilty of gross misconduct. A number resigned while under investigation. A number were accused but were acquitted. But we're talking about an investigation that was essentially carried out by an Oxfam anti-fraud team, not by experienced law enforcement investigators or people experienced in sexual crimes. So a lot of those people were subsequently dismissed for lesser matters, such as the bullying and intimidation of witnesses, or in one case, downloading pornography onto an Oxfam computer. So there were a range of offences, but the common thread running through all of them was some pretty nasty sexual exploitation of local women who were, in desperate need after an earthquake that caused massive devastation in Haiti.
Well, on Monday, Oxfam released an internal investigation into the allegations of sexual misconduct that showed Oxfam's country director in Haiti, Roland Van Houwermeiren, admitted to using prostitutes in his residence during a humanitarian aid operation before his resignation in 2011. I mean, it's amazing what you just pointed out, that he was fired from another charity years before, and Oxfam then picked him up, not clear what they knew. Well, last week, Van Houwermeiren dismissed the allegations of sexual misconduct.
I don't feel good about the people who, of course, are told by perhaps less professional journalists that Oxfam is an instrument to have sex orgies using the money from good civilians. That is absolutely not true.
So again, that's Roland Van Houwermeiren. Sean O'Neill.
He's entitled to his say, but I'm very confident in my sources, both the human sources I've spoken to who were there at the time, who know exactly what went on in that investigation, and very confident of the documents that we obtained, some of which are, a transcript of his words.
We're going to come back to this discussion. We're talking to Sean O'Neill, who's the chief reporter at the Times of London, on this this series of pieces that is blowing open this scandal around Oxfam, as Oxfam tries to contain the damage. In addition, we'll be joined by the Haitian-American writer Edwidge Danticat and Taina Bien-Aimé, who is the head of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. Stay with us.
Empty stomachs, but the mouths are full. American proud, American poor. Send you a free book every year. Discount for your diagnosis, dear. Give you, take away your fears. American poor, American here. Left my innocence in the sea. With all the things that I make believe. Shadow thing, and it's just me. Make believe, make believe. People are working silently.
American Poor, a new song by the band Dead Horses, debuting here on Democracy Now! This is Democracy Now! As we continue our look at how Oxfam has been hit with dozens more misconduct allegations involving a slew of countries in the days since the Times of London revealed Oxfam tried to cover up sex crimes by senior aid workers in Haiti after the devastating 2010 earthquake. Joining us from London is Sean O'Neill, chief reporter at the Times newspaper in London, which broke the story of Oxfam and saved the children. In Miami, Florida, we're joined by Edwidge Danticat, Haitian-American novelist. And here in New York, Taina Bien-Aimé is with us, who is executive director of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. We welcome you all to Democracy Now! Edwidge Danticat, if you could explain, if you can respond to this explosive story that has come out that you may have known some details of or rumors of, stories of, for years. I don't know.
I wish I could say that it was shocking. I think there's a way that these large organizations work in Haiti in which they bypass the state completely or consider the state insignificant. It was even said by the folks at Oxfam that they didn't report these violations because they thought the state was too consumed with the earthquake, as if there was nothing else to do. So in the UN, MINUSTA has been accused of similar things, and the women have said that they've literally grabbed them off the street and raped them, boys and girls, and the UN with MINUSTA was running a sex ring with children.
Explain what you mean by MINUSTA for people who don't know.
Well, MINUSTA is the UN quote-unquote peacekeeping force that has been in Haiti the last decade, and they were also accused of running sex rings and raping young women who were then left with no options. Like they would go and complain, and they would remove the peacekeeper and send them back home, which seems to be the similar pattern with what happened with this gentleman. He was, gently moved to another post where he might have continued carrying on these same things. I think that's what happens when you have an extremely vulnerable population where these large NGOs consider themselves in some ways a state on their own. So the most vulnerable, women and girls, are considered prey to them, and they'll do with them what they want for a piece of food, which as Mr. O'Neill portrayed so clearly in what was happening with Oxfam. And possibly Oxfam is I would be surprised if they were the only ones, because you have impunity, total impunity. People are not punished when they do this. They apologize and they move on, and they leave wrecked and destroyed lives behind them.
I mean, we're talking about a time, 2010 in Haiti, the earthquake, where hundreds of thousands of people died. We're talking about a crushed population, Edwidge.
And you have extremely vulnerable children who in some cases have lost their parents. You have families separated. You have people really in dire need and who are extremely vulnerable. And even in ordinary times, it would be extremely wrong to take advantage of that situation. But at that moment where people are still trying to find their loved ones, bury their dead, find food and water, to decide that at that moment you want to traumatize and assault people and have orgies while people are dying, it's just unconscionable. And the worst thing is that they will not be punished. It will, there'll be this outrage, there's this moment, but it'll carry on. And what we hope that this is a turning point perhaps for all these other organizations that might still be doing this, and that maybe this is a Me Too moment as we're living in this country for aid workers who do this kind of thing, not just in Haiti, but all over the vulnerable world where they're supposed to go and help.
Reporter Sean O'Neill, can you explain what's at stake here, how Oxfam gets its funding? I mean, I think around 7,000 people have stopped their donations. But what about countries?
I think Oxfam gets something in the region of £300 million a year from various governments and public authorities. So we're talking about the British government, we're talking about US aid, we're talking about United Nations funding, we're talking about European Union funding, and other governments. The public donates about £90 million a year. It makes about £100 million a year from its trading division. There is an Oxfam shop, a charity shop, on virtually every high street in Britain. It's a massive organisation with a huge amount of revenue, operating in dozens and dozens of countries around the world. So its global reputation is absolutely on the line here. There's an awful lot at stake, and that's why it's scrambling to. I lost count yesterday watching that hearing in Parliament of the number of times people from Oxfam apologised. It was one apology after another, after another, after another. They've completely changed their tone from a week before when they were saying we did nothing wrong. We dealt with these men and we were completely transparent. But they're under massive pressure here, especially from the British government. The International Development Minister, Penny Mordaunt, basically said to them yesterday, you have to be held to account. You have to hold yourselves to account. I want to see the results of how you change, or we will not give you any more money. And she's saying that not just to Oxfam, but to every single charity that the British government provides funding to. If you do not demonstrate your ability to protect the vulnerable, to have proper safeguarding policies and practices, and to pursue wrongdoers, not let them swan off into another job. If you don't take these steps, you will not get British government funding. British government aid will go elsewhere.
Which is an extremely important point. You have reports have emerged. Oxfam rehired one of the aid workers who was fired for alleged sexual misconduct in Haiti just months later. An Oxfam
spokesperson. By Oxfam America, I might say. So you wonder what bit of joined-up thinking goes on in that organisation. Sacked by Oxfam Great Britain, rehired by Oxfam America. What did they say to one another about this man?
And then sent off to Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm. That's correct, yeah.
So South African Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu stepped down as an ambassador for Oxfam. The 86-year-old Nobel Peace Laureate said he was deeply disappointed by allegations of, quote, immorality and possible criminality involving humanitarian workers linked to the charity. Last week, British actress Minnie Driver also quit her position as an ambassador for Oxfam, writing on her Twitter account, all I can tell you about this awful revelation about Oxfam is that I'm devastated for the women who were used by people sent there to help them, devastated by the response of an organization I have been raising awareness for since I was 9 years old. I wanted to bring Taina Bien-Aimé into the conversation, who is executive director of the organization Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. Your response to these revelations and what you think should happen?
Well, I'd like to echo Edwige's thoughts that we have known for decades. We have heard rumors. We have family in Haiti who tell us that blue helmets exchange a glass of milk for raping a child, that international aid workers abuse their power systematically, not all, but certainly a large percentage of the leadership. So this, unfortunately, is not new. This is something that the United Nations has been struggling with. The last 3 UN Secretary Generals have established measures and policies and statements, hoping that a zero-tolerance culture will be embedded in not only among UN contractors and UN personnel, but international aid agencies and Blue Helmets, et cetera. But there is zero interest for zero tolerance of exploitation of women and girls, of abuse of power in the most egregious and violent way, as we're seeing with the Oxfam situation in Haiti.
Do you think they should be defunded?
No, I don't think that they should be defunded. I think this is an incredible opportunity to have conversations with Oxfam to ensure that the policies that they do have in place for zero tolerance of purchasing sex, for zero tolerance of exploitation, that they are implemented. We need to see more women in middle management and upper management. And also, this is an opportunity for Oxfam to invest in the women and girls that they have exploited and brutalized. I think it's fantastic that Oxfam managers are apologizing to the Haitian government, but they are not the ones who are owed an apology. Oxfam owes an apology to the women and girls and boys, I'm assuming as well, who have been exploited and trafficked and prostituted. There's an opportunity to have exit programs and programs for these people so that they do have the ability to rebuild their lives and move toward economic self-sufficiency.
I wanted to go to the statement of Oxfam's executive director. We did invite her on the show, Oxfam International Executive Director Winnie Byanyima. They said she couldn't join us, but they sent us a statement where she said, "From the bottom of my heart, I'm asking for forgiveness." She said, "Of course, words are not enough. I've agreed to a plan of action with Oxfam's Board of International Directors, which will see us double the number of people who work on safeguarding the people we serve. We're also asking respected women's rights experts to lead an independent commission, which will take a long, hard look at our operations and tell us what we need to change about our culture and practices. And we're setting up a new database of people authorized to give references. Right now, I have 2 utmost priorities for Oxfam: continuing to provide support to the millions of vulnerable people we work with around the world and learning vital lessons from our past mistakes to make sure such abuse and exploitation does not happen again." Taina, your response.
Well, we look forward to these kind of measures, and I think we have to welcome. Again, this isn't a Me Too moment. Why has this been hidden for 7 years from the public? We don't really know the answer to that. Perhaps Sean O'Neill has an idea, since he's the one who spoke closely to the sources, as to whether it is the environment of holding, and it's mostly men, obviously, accountable to the exploitation and violence that they've perpetuated against women and girls, from sexual harassment to rape. And so I would welcome a conversation with Oxfam to help them develop gender-sensitive policies and ensuring that this doesn't happen again.
Edwidge Danticat, I mean, you have Haiti, ground zero for just devastation. Over 300,000 people died in the earthquake alone. You had organizations like the Red Cross that raised almost $500 million for Haiti. What was it? Ending up building 6 permanent homes. You have the UN forces. You were talking about sexual abuse, the issue of cholera, bringing cholera, even if obviously not intentionally, to Haiti, that killed how many people? How do you hold these international organizations accountable?
Well, I think in some ways these sexual assaults that we hear about, whether through this scandal and through what the United Nations forces have done in Haiti, they're almost a metaphor for the rape of Haiti, which continues through these organizations. And I think the Red Cross, on another scale, is a manifestation of that all this money was raised on behalf of Haiti after this moment. That's another kind of a violation. And apologies are fantastic, and I'm glad that there's been so many that Oxfam, for example, has gone from denial, as Mr. O'Neill reported, to some acceptance and these stream of apologies. But we also need some action, and the impunity has to stop. The fact that these organizations feel like they can come to Haiti and do everything they want, anything they want, to anybody they want, to the most vulnerable of the population, that needs to stop. And that won't stop until people are held accountable for what they do. I think the UN was a terrible model in terms of all their actions, and they also, there is an apology from them as well, but they didn't follow up in ways that were concrete about all the people, like nearly 1 million people who were affected by the cholera. 10,000 people died. And an apology is not going to do anything for those people. So the apologies are fine, but I think the impunity has to stop. The fact that these people feel like they can go to Haiti because it is Haiti and do whatever they want, that needs to stop.
Al Jazeera reports Antonio Guterres, the former UN Secretary General, confirmed there's been a total of 145 cases of sexual assault and abuse across all UN peace missions in 2016, up from 99 reported cases in 2015. The countries with the highest number of reported allegations include Haiti, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan. Legal battles against the UN mission from within Haiti and globally face a legal catch. Peacekeepers are given immunity to any criminal liability in the countries they serve. Edwidge.
Well, that's at the core of the problem, because you have people who are already extremely poor, who are vulnerable within the society that they are, and I guess there's a sort of a predatorial attitude towards them because people know that nothing will happen to them. And even this gentleman, he was moved to another post to continue his work. But what about the people whose lives he affected? They didn't even mention it to the state. Nobody in Haiti knew. I'm happy to see that the government has come out very forcefully about that, and maybe, hopefully, that will lead to some of the actions that one of the heads of Oxfam mentioned. But it will also, I hope, lead to these other organizations really having a deep look within their structures and how they work, so that the most vulnerable people can be protected, because they often have no recourse. And I have a sense that even in Mr. O'Neill's report, it's a very small group of people that were able to speak out. There are people who would be too fearful to speak out, and their stories will never be told. And we also have to think about these people and the future encounters that the vulnerable population, the women and girls, will have with others who come along after the Oxfams and the others.
Tariana Bien-Aimé, you look at these issues across the world. You deal with the exploitation of sex trafficking in women and girls. And so you see these countries, the most vulnerable countries. What are you demanding right now?
Well, I think, like everyone else, we are calling for an end to impunity, but we're also calling for a deep look into our culture of acceptance of prostitution. Because if you look at what the reaction of social media, a lot of people are saying, it's Haiti, for God's sakes, how else are they going to eat? And that is the crux of the question. And that is also a culture that Oxfam and the UN need to examine. Sexual harassment within those organizations is rampant, so they also need to clean house. There is the culture of male sexual access to women, and just the way the media is portraying these stories of exploitation and rape and sexual exploitation, it really is as to whether they were paid or not, or whether they were underage or not. There are no stories about these women and girls, about how their lives are devastated, whether they're still alive or not, how are they surviving. And I think we need to change the conversation around the culture of impunity and the culture of male sexual access to women's bodies.
And Sean O'Neill, you talk about Save the Children. 30 people just fired over this issue as well.
Yeah, I think 19 people fired over sexual harassment cases, and that seems to be in the Save the Children workforce, and another 11 fired in the 120 countries they work in over child protection issues. So I think this problem probably cuts across the entire sector. And one of the things that shocked me last week was we did have one major charity come out and say, we have no issues, no cases have been reported to us of sexual misconduct. And I just thought, well, you're not looking for them. You're not proactively looking for these cases if you think you haven't got any, because every workplace has these problems. And what we've seen and what everybody in the aid sector knows, or seems to know when you research this, is that sexual exploitation happens especially in emergency zones, in disaster zones where civil society has collapsed, and charities need to be aware of that. I find it, can I just say, that the statement from Oxfam saying we're drawing up a plan of action and we're going to do X, Y, and Z, I kind of think, well, look, you have known in Oxfam that you had a massive problem since 2011. Why didn't you have a plan of action already? Why is that not implemented? And why is there not a joined-up mechanism across the aid sector where every charity, and there are maybe 10 or 12 massive charities dominating this field, why don't they have a register of who's worked for them? Have they had issues? Why can't they cross-check that and find out if somebody is safe to work for them in a vulnerable position with vulnerable people? Some of these reforms should have been put in place years ago, because everybody in this sector seems to know that the problem was there.
And of course, the issue of criminal prosecutions is another one. Well, we'll continue to follow the story. I want to thank Sean O'Neill, chief reporter at the Times of London. We'll link to your pieces. Edwidge Danticat, thank you for joining us from Miami, the great Haitian-American writer. And Taina Bien-Aimé, head of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.
I've been a moonshiner for 17 long years. I've spent all my money on whiskey and beer. I go to some hollow and say,
Moonshiner by Bob Dylan, sung by a very young Bob Dylan about getting older, something 17 people won't have the privilege of doing, getting older, in Florida. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. Dozens of students who survived last week's school shooting in Florida have arrived in Tallahassee to push for new gun control measures following last week's mass shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. 17 people were killed. The students are holding a rally today outside the Florida State House just a day after the Republican-controlled Florida House of Representatives blocked a bid to bring a bill to ban sales of assault-style rifles in the state. While the Florida shooting has sparked a national debate over guns and the lobbying power of the National Rifle Association, the NRA, much less attention has been paid to another aspect of the shooting. The Florida gunman, 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz, was a member of the Army Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps program before he was expelled from the school. He was wearing his JROTC shirt when he carried out the massacre in an attempt to blend in with other students. Cruz was also part of a 4-person JROTC marksmanship team at the school, which had received $10,000 in funding from the NRA. 17 months ago, the school sent out a tweet saying, quote, MSD, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, JROTC marksmanship team would like to thank the NRA for their grateful donation of nearly $10,000 to upgrade and replenish equipment. According to the Associated Press, Cruz and other members of the team used air rifles special-made for target shooting, typically on indoor ranges at targets the size of a small coin. One of Cruz's former classmates said, quote, "He was a very good shot." Meanwhile, the Army's awarded the Medal of Heroism to 3 junior ROTC cadets who died in the Parkland, Florida shooting, 15-year-old Peter Wang and 2 14-year-old freshmen, Martin Duke and Elena Petty. Wang reportedly died while holding a door open to help other classmates escape. We're joined now by Pat Elder, director of the National Coalition to Protect Student Privacy, an organization that confronts militarism in the schools, author of Military Recruiting in the United States. Can you respond to what took place at the school, how unusual it is, what JROTC is?
Well, thanks for having me on, Amy. The JROTC program is a military recruitment program that has more than 3,000 schools. Of those, more than 1,600 schools participate in marksmanship programs across the country. So we have firing ranges in high schools in every state. They fire .177 caliber rifles. They're CO2 fired. The lead projectile travels at 600 feet per second. By comparison, a .22 caliber rifle travels at between 800 and 900 feet per second. So it's a lethal weapon categorized by the Army, and Florida state law specifically prohibits carrying these weapons, these lethal weapons, into schools.
So you have Nicholas Cruz, the confessed gunman. He's part of the ROTC program, supported by the NRA at this school, even as the school has these complaints of harassment and abuse and ultimately expel him. He's wearing a JROTC T-shirt when he opens fire on his classmates.
Well, apparently he wanted to convey to the world that he was affiliated with the JROTC program. Amy, it's an insidious practice. We have the United States Army and the other 3 branches in the high schools putting lethal weapons into the hands of 13 and 14-year-olds. It's time this stops. And the program has more than 575,000 children in all the states, and it teaches an insidious, horrendous, reactionary view of American history. The United States government, for instance, had an innocent Navy boat off of the Gulf of Tonkin, and it was maliciously fired on by the North Vietnamese. We helped Cubans win their independence because they were treated so poorly by the Spanish. I think you get the idea. We're not just talking about putting weapons into the hands of 13-year-olds. We're also talking about a system that brainwashes these children with textbooks. For instance, the civics textbook used in JROTC programs across the country has a unit on United States civics entitled, "You the People." I learned it as "We the People." Didn't you?
So what is the connection between the NRA and these JROTC programs, at least at the school in Florida?
Well, the NRA typically does not give money. They give materials and supplies. That way they can purchase the materials and supplies from their supporters. Throughout the country, and especially in the Rust Belt and poor urban schools, the individual schools want to set up firing ranges in their schools. And so they need materials. They need the backstops. They need the targets. They need the guns. They need the CO2 cartridges, and they need the lead pellets. So the NRA will help these schools through a grants process, and they spend money on schools through these grants across the country. It should be noted, too, that these are lead projectiles. The lead accumulates at the muzzle end of the gun on the floor, and the lead accumulates at the target backstop. There's been a link between the lead in firing ranges that have only these types of guns and elevated blood lead levels. It's something that needs to be discussed, and there is a health aspect of of Jay Rotzi shooting in the United States.
Well, Pat Elder, I want to thank you for being with us. We're going to continue our discussion and post it online at democracynow.org under web exclusives. Pat Elder, director of the National Coalition to Protect Student Privacy, an organization that confronts militarism in the schools, author of Military Recruiting in the United States. That does it for our broadcast. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke, Renee Feldstein, Guzder, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wills, Laura Gottesdiener, Sam Alcoff, John Hamilton, Ravi Karen, Hani Masood, Tarina Nadura, Nat Needham. I'm Amy Goodman. This is Democracy Now! Thank you for joining us.